Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. And yesterday was the Canadian Grand Prix, and it was a very interesting race with a very interesting outcome. Disappointingly, it did finish under a safety car, but I think we had an interesting strategy race leading up to the final few laps, and it did look like we were going to get a four-way fight for second, which sadly never happened, and of course a very dramatic end to the race. I'm still in exile, but make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's jump into this look at the Canadian Grand Prix of 2025. You may have noticed before the last few Grand Prix, I've been uploading compilations of previous reviews of certain Grand Prix, like the Monaco Grand Prix and Spanish Grand Prix. I didn't do that for the Canadian Grand Prix because I haven't actually covered that many of them. In fact, this is only the third. 2019 is when I started this channel, but it was the race after the Canadian Grand Prix, the French Grand Prix, where I actually began with Formula 1 reviews, and then the race was cancelled in 2020 and 2021. So I've only ever covered 20, and for some reason I've missed one of them. So I've only covered two previously to this. And so this is only the third Canadian review I've done, and it's a shame because it's a track I like very much. And I did find this to be a very entertaining weekend of Formula 1, even through practice and qualifying and the race itself. George Russell honestly took all the glory this weekend. First in the race, pole position, fastest lap. It was a mega drive from George. Mercedes' first win of the year. It keeps George Russell, it keeps him in the chat for the championship. He's 60 points behind, but if McLaren slip up, it's not an insurmountable amount of points to get back. This could be an interesting season for Mercedes. And George Russell, he looks quick. Maybe it was track specific, but still, I think George has had a cracking year, to be honest. And that was true for Andrea Kimi Antonelli as well. Third place. After 3 races where he didn't score points, this was just an incredibly mature drive from him. And third place, his first podium in Formula 1. It's honestly, it's a sign of things to come. This kid's going to be winning races and world champion probably very shortly after this year. It was something I was completely wrong about. I'm wrong about a lot. Not Lewis Hamilton, he is completely crap. But I was wrong about Andrea Kimi Antonelli. I was not very certain that he had enough experience behind him. I thought if he had a bad run of races, it might shatter his confidence and set a precedent for the rest of the year. Well, he's had 3 races where he didn't score, and now he's finished third. So it shows how wrong I can be. The big moment of this race was, of course, Lando Norris driving into Oscar Piastri. A terrible mistake for him and his championship hopes. Piastri has come in less years at McLaren, less experience from Norris, and seemingly he has his number. 5 wins this year. This was not the best race for McLaren. The first time neither car has been on the podium this year. And for both drivers, it's only the second race in 2025 where they've not been on the podium. I don't know how worried McLaren should be. Again, it could be very track specific, but I think this race will be a concern. It might be a turning point. It's a confidence boost for the other teams. And for Norris, he did very well to admit his mistake straight away. There was no even trying to slightly blame Piastri. He held his hands up. He went for a gap that wasn't there. It was a big mistake. And Lando Norris has made mistakes. And it's going to be interesting to see if it costs him a championship. But it's a dramatic moment. It spoiled the race, sadly, because after that we only had the safety car. And it's made the title race favour Oscar Piastri by a race. Really, it gives Oscar Piastri an out at some point. We've got a lot of races to go, obviously, but if Oscar Piastri has a crash or a mechanical failure, this moment from Lando Norris saves him for at least a little while. And I don't think Lando Norris would want to give his biggest opponent in the championship that. So it's only 22 points, the gap between them. And honestly, if Oscar Piastri broke down or crashed in Austria and Lando Norris won, it would change things back around. But I think for McLaren, the worry is Max Verstappen's not that far behind, 43 points. And Red Bull have the ability to catch them. George Russell, he's only another 20 points behind, so the fight for the championship is still wide open in 2025. It's the most wide open it's been for a very, very long time, and that's going to keep it interesting. This dominance from McLaren, it's going to be interesting to see if we get back to that, or if this is a turning point. I think one team that's not really in the argument for championship is Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, he's been driving well. He's scored points at every race, bar the one. Well, both him and Hamilton scored points at every race, bar China, where they were disqualified, and they did score points in that race. But it's just not coming together for Ferrari. They seem to lack something. Outright winning pace, I guess. But Charles Leclerc, I mean, it was a decent enough race. It was a strong performance to fifth. Hamilton was kind of in no man's land in sixth. Before the yellow flags, he was like 20 seconds behind Charles Leclerc, but 20 seconds ahead of everyone else. It's kind of a nothing race, but Hamilton is now nearly 30 points behind Leclerc. He's 16 ahead of Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who's just had that really poor run of form. It's just not looking good for Ferrari. Mercedes, Red Bull in the hands of Max Verstappen and McLaren just seem to be in a much better place right now. There's been talks of Frederic Vasseur getting the boot. I think that's something Ferrari do too much. We've seen it before with Binotto and others, where they have a bad period and it's just get rid of him, bring someone else in. Whereas I think if you look at Red Bull, they stick with staff a lot longer, and I think that pays off. Same at Mercedes, probably same at McLaren as well. I can't think of how often you hear about changes at McLaren. But Ferrari, it seems to come up a lot that they move people around, and I wonder if that unsettles things. But something's got to change for them. They are very much falling away from the top class of the field. They're still ahead of the midfield, but they're just kind of stuck in between at the moment. And if you look at the Constructors' Championship, McLaren well ahead of everyone. It's pretty close between Mercedes and Ferrari, with Red Bull behind. But when you consider that Max Verstappen has scored 155 of Red Bull's 162 points, he's only, Red Bull are only 30 or 40 points behind Ferrari, and Max Verstappen's doing that on his own. If Yuki Tsunoda could get some points, it would start putting pressure on Ferrari if things don't change. And with a lot of Grand Prix coming up before the summer break, I think we've got like 4 or 5 left. I think that's going to set the standard for the season for them. If Ferrari have sort of mediocre a few races, I think that's going to continue throughout the year, but they really need to start picking up. I think not only more podiums for both cars, but one of them needs to win before we get to the summer break. Everyone else in the field, it was an interesting race for quite a few drivers. Alexander Albon had a few problems throughout this race. He went on the grass early on, he had engine issues, he had an argument with his team over strategy. Strategy he ended up doing just didn't work for him. He was at the back of the field, and then he broke down eventually anyway. It's a waste of a very good qualifying. Albon has been flying this year, 8th in the championship. He's doing a fantastic job. But what he doesn't need is Williams to start throwing it away. And he also needs reliability, because that has cost him the last 2 races. Sainz, his teammate, he started scoring points regularly for Williams now. It's 5 points finishes in the last 6 races. I'm pretty sure he'll be happy with that, and he's going to have to start closing the gap to his teammate. But Williams, they are in a good place, but they look fragile, and that might haunt them this year. Esteban Ocon did a fantastic job for Haas. Didn't really look like they had much pace in qualifying, but a very long strategy on the hard tyre really paid off for Ocon. He held up Hamilton as well on really old tyres, and I think it was just he's in 9th in the championship. It's probably the best we've seen of Esteban Ocon since he was at Force India Racing Point times. His teammate Oliver Behrman, he was 11th outside of the points, but I also think that was a pretty good drive from Haas. It was their 200th race as well. I'm happy to see them do well. Happy for Ocon to get points. It's looking like a good package for Haas at the moment. I think they are looking good in the midfield. They are sort of on par with Aston Martin at the moment, maybe slightly ahead of the Racing Bulls and Stake and Alpine. So it's keeping it interesting. I think their midfield looks very tight, and it's hard to choose between some of these teams. Nico Hulkenberg is doing a fantastic job for Stake as well. Again, points here, second race in a row. Best Sauber driver for a long time. It's been a fantastic start to the year for him. But I think it's going to be difficult for that to continue. I think Stake will start to drop off. Fernando Alonso in the points again for the second race in a row. Compared to his teammate, I honestly think Lance Stroll should not be there. If his wrist is causing him problems, it's time to call it a day, because your career is going nowhere anyway. And honestly, you're just taking that seat away from someone else. It's time for Stroll to go, but it's been time for Stroll to go for a long time. But Alonso is doing that car, you know, a world of good. And honestly, I think Aston Martin need him right now. Racing Bulls, this was a poor race from them. Liam Lawson, I think the strategy wasn't working, but he wasn't very quick anyway. Hadjar seemed to lack pace. Lawson didn't make it to the end. Hadjar was down in 16th. Bortoleto didn't score points again. Still no points in his Formula 1 career, but it wasn't a terrible drive. He was around the midfield. He was 14th in the end. Colapinto, I thought this was much better from him. He was outpacing Pierre Gasly all weekend, and he finished ahead of him. But it's still very poor from Alpine, and they've only got 11 points, all from Gasly. It's just, they looked okay at a couple of races, and now it's just not working for them. So Alpine, I think they could do with a big upgrade. I think they should be right as well. They're moving to Mercedes engines, and it's Mercedes who are having a lot of reliability issues, especially with Albon and Antonelli both having engine issues at the last few races. If that continues, I think Alpine might have to look at that engine deal and say, was this a mistake? That was the Canadian Grand Prix. It was an interesting one, and it did have its drama. There were periods of the race where not a lot was happening, and we still didn't get a lot of overtaking. But this was one of the better Grand Prix this year. I did enjoy it. Max Verstappen being on 11 penalty points and having to sort of toe the line very tightly is interesting as well. I think that's going to make some of the races coming up very, very interesting. We might not be able to see like Max Verstappen at his best or at his most lungiest in Austria and Britain and Belgium. So those tracks, I think, is all too easy to accidentally hit someone and get a penalty point, and I think Max is going to have to be very, very careful. But other than that, I think honestly it's going to be very interesting to see if McLaren can continue their top form, or if Max Verstappen and the Mercedes and the Ferraris can close in on them. So with that, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of the Lando Norris incident? Has he really hurt his championship? Let me know your thoughts on everything else that happened at the Canadian Grand Prix. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back very soon. Have a good one.